Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Songwriters on Process podcast. My name is Benno Papari, and since 2010, I've run the Songwriters on Process website, where you can find more than 200 conversations with songwriters about the creative process. I'm not here to talk about tour stories, band drama, how a band got its name, or favorite foods. My goal is to treat songwriters as writers, plain and simple. This is an intelligent conversation about the writing process between two writers. And today's interview is with B.J. Barham of American Aquarium and New York Times bestselling author S.A. Cosby. So we did this interview in April of 2021, but I'll give you the backstory as to how this even came about to talk to these two guys. I had interviewed B.J. about 6 months before this, just by himself. And one of the things we talked about was, we talked a lot about reading. And if you know anything about B.J. Barham of American Aquarium, the man is a voracious reader, voracious. And it makes sense. I've always said that people who write great lyrics they probably read a lot. And that's certainly the case with BJ. So anyway, one of the things we talked about was how much we loved the book BLACKTOP Wasteland, which was S.A. Cosby's first novel. And I thought, wouldn't that be neat to have both of these guys on to talk about writing? And what is interesting is we did this interview, as I said, I did this interview with BJ and SA back in April of 2021. That was 2 months before SA blew up with his novel RAZORBLADE Tears, which just landed on so many best of lists and bestseller lists. And the book is being optioned for a movie. Jerry Bruckheimer movie, I believe. But so this interview was a couple months before that. And if you listen to the interview, he talks a little bit about the book, but not too much. But, gosh, listening to this interview now and hearing him talk about the book, and little did we know how much it would blow up. By the way, you can also watch the video version of this on the Songwriters on Process YouTube channel. But it was so much fun listening to these two guys talk about writing. And two quotes stuck out to me here, BJ, and they're related. BJ said, "Talent means writing about characters in a good enough fashion that people think you're writing about yourself." And SA said, "The mark of a genius is the writer's ability to write about something that has no resonance in his own life." And so those things are really related, right? I mean, what they're saying is that good writers write about people outside of themselves. And that's the mark of a good writer. So I just kind of sat back and listened to these guys talk, and it was so much fun. They are both big fans of each other's work, so that made it extra special. And it goes without saying that if you have not listened to BJ's music, listen to it. And if you want a great book, pick up either BLACKTOP Wasteland or RAZORBLADE Tears. You can't go wrong. So with that, here is my interview with B.J. Barham and S.A. Cosby.
Yeah, S.A., I'm a huge fan of the book. My first introduction to you was BLACKTOP Wasteland. Shameless plug.
There you go. I know. I'm glad. I have the Kindle version. I'm glad you have the hard copy to show. I'm embarrassed.
Anything that I read and resonates and I love, I always make sure I buy a hard copy. But I think we have a mutual friend in David Joy. And David Joy.
Yeah.
And David Joy is, so he mentioned us, our band, in his most recent novel. And I posted a picture of it, and he's like, if you really dig my work, you're going to love BLACKTOP Wasteland. Like, it's going to blow your mind. And so I immediately ordered it, and I read it in one sitting. I just sat down one afternoon and just,
oh, wow.
I fell in love with it. Like, because I know so many of those characters that you wrote about, like, they're going to be different names, but I know those, I grew up with those people. And so I think my first question, and this is just a superficial question: is there a real Beauregard in your life?
Bud was an amalgam. No, I used the name on purpose because growing up as a kid, my grandmother used to watch a lot of old movies, and they always had these Confederate soldiers named Beauregard this and Beauregard that. And I thought it'd be really cool to claim that name for an African-American character, a badass African-American character. And so I don't have a real Beauregard in my life, but the character is an amalgamation of three people. I had a cousin, first cousin, whose name was Haywood Ward. He's no longer with us, unfortunately. And he was sort of like Beauregard in respect of he was a mechanical genius, just came out the womb turning wrenches. And, he used to soup up cars, and we drive over to the other side of town and like on midnight on Saturday nights in the summer, we go over there and drag race, or unsanctioned street race. And so I was always impressed with his Mozart-like ability to work on cars. The scene in the beginning where Bug is listening to the engine and he knows what's wrong with it, that's taken from true life. My cousin do that. He could listen to your car and tell you, oh, your valve is loose, or your spark plug's on gap right. And he wouldn't even have to look at it. He could just tell you that, and he's always right. And so I took some aspects of him. I have another relative, his brother, whose name is George, but his nickname was the Mall when we were growing up as kids. And George, Haywood was like Beauregard with the mechanics, but Haywood was a big teddy bear. He was a big sweetheart. George is a little different. And George is he's not someone you would want to tangle with. And and so he got the nickname the Mall because in a bar fight, he hit a dude one time so hard that when he went to the hospital, they thought he had been attacked with a hammer. And the guy was like, no, he just hit me with his fist. And so he was big. I'm a big dude, but these guys were big dudes too. And so some of Beauregard's physical descriptions and some of his more hands-on interludes were inspired by my cousin George. And then a little bit of Beauregard is my brother, the way he's very thoughtful. He's really smart. My brother's a brilliant guy. And so he's an amalgamation of us. And then also just some stuff I throw in there just for fun. But yeah, I grew up with a whole bunch of first cousins. My dad had 9 brothers and sisters. My mom had like 6. Yeah. And so a lot of what it happens in Blacktop Wasteland, the drag racing, going to the one bar in town that everybody has to go to, a lot of those things are representative of the people and the area that I grew up in.
Awesome. Because it's so much of that resonated with me. I grew up, my dad sold auto parts for 40 years. And my dad can literally, if you name an auto part for any car, he'll give you the 16-digit serial number off of it, tell you what it does. and growing up, my dad, it's funny because you had a Duster in the car and my dad had a Dodge Dart. And so the Dart was just the Dodge. Wow. The Dart was just the Dodge equivalent of the Plymouth. And the cover of my solo record is a picture of my dad standing beside his Dodge Dart. And so when I started reading your novel,
that's too cool.
I was just like, oh wow. I was like, this is taking me to like this crazy place. And you painted such a great picture because I've met those super strong, silent type that would literally fight anybody for their own family. And just kind of stayed in their lane and only came out of it when they had to. And I think that's why it was such an easy first read for me, or just one read for me, is because like from the opening when you start describing him listening to the motor, and like I was like, that's 3 people that I'm related to right now. Like, and I love a thing that I write about a lot is kind of knowing who you used to be and seeing the growth that you've made as a person and not wanting to get back there. But I loved how you made this guy have to revisit the badass that he used to, because like he got bored. He became a dad, he became just a mechanic. He was boring. And like between his mom and between the daughter going to college, like he had to resort to like, okay, it's time to put on the bat suit again and go do my thing. Yeah. And that shit, it blew my mind. It's a story. Again, it's like it's been like we all have those famous songs or famous stories. Springsteen's got a ton of them about running from who you used to be. But it's such a great. It was like 4 hours of my life that I was just like, man, this guy's talking about Reeds. I grew up in a tiny little place called Reedsville, North Carolina, and it could have been.
Yeah, I know where that is.
Yeah, it could have been Southeast Virginia. It could have been anywhere in Georgia or South Carolina or Tennessee. Yeah. We all have that one bar in the middle of town, and everybody knows everybody. And hell, I'm pretty sure I'm related to 5 Ronnies. Like I'm pretty sure. I
went to school with a lot of Ronnies, man. I went to school with a lot of guys like Ronnie, man. Guys who are just not quite smart enough to get out of their own way, you know. But Ronnie, like for instance, you mentioned Bruce Springsteen. Like Bruce Springsteen was a huge influence on this book. I'm fascinated with the idea of identity. I'm fascinated with who we are versus who we think we are and who we want to be. And what does that mean and what does that look like and how do you get there? And, you know, you listen to a song like Jungle Land, or you listen to a song like Thunder Road, or even a song like I'm on Fire. You know, it's all about making choices based on the person you want to be, trying to be the best version of yourself. And so with Bug, and like when you look at Bug and Ronnie, Bug really wants to be the good guy. He really does. But circumstances and his own mistakes and his own failings make him the bad guy. Ronnie doesn't want to be the good guy. Ronnie just wants to not be broke. And I think I tried to create this kind of two-headed monster with them at certain points, where you see both sides of being poor from a small town. You know, I like to say that the good thing about a small town is everybody knows you and your mama and your cousins. And the bad thing about small towns, everybody knows you, your mama and your cousins. And so a lot of times it's hard for you to get away from the preconceived notions that people have about you. You know, like in my small town, some people would say, well, that family, well, they're all, you know, they're rough, they're all drunks, and you can't trust them. That family's liars. And, you know, you get sort of swallowed up by this monolith of people's preconceived notions. And I like writing about that. I like working with that from a small town perspective, because I think, in my personal opinion, is that the small town is a microcosm of the rest of the country, you know? And so I love talking about those things from that perspective. But on the other side of it, like, you know, car chases and bar fights and shootouts and stuff like that, I'm attracted to those just because they drive the narrative along. But Bug and his relationship with his kids and his relationship with his wife and his mother and Booney is the motor that actually drives the story. And so, but yeah, I grew up with a lot of guys like Ronnie and Reggie and Bug and Kelvin. And, you know, I have older guys in my life that are all Booney. And so it was just, for me, it was such a honor and such a fun experience bringing them to life, you know, kind of telling their stories and telling those stories in a way that seems to have resonated with people.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite parts about it is this story could have literally taken place in any city in America, but it is most certainly rooted in the South. Like, there's no question. Yeah. There's no question about what region this takes place in. And that's the thing I fell in love with it, because I grew up in one of those towns. I grew up in one of those towns where everybody at church knew everything about your family. And so I saw so much of myself in this book. And another thing I wanted to get to, and I don't know if it was on purpose, but the relationship that you painted between his daughter and him, Bug and his daughter, was so great, because we all know the people who I've dated, the girls who hated their father but still love their father. Mm-hmm. And there was this, there was this, you could tell that she was, you know, you did a really great job of as a father to a daughter. I was reading it being like, I totally see how this works. Like, she still needs him. Mm-hmm. She's going to do everything she can to piss him off, but she still needs him in life. Yeah. And I thought it was such a beautiful, the way you developed that relationship, from not knowing anything about them to the very end, when you realize, like, this man has been pushed out of her life, and literally he would do anything he could to make sure that she has a chance at a better life. Like, that's fatherhood in a nutshell, is wanting better for your kids than you had for yourself. And I thought you did a really unreal job of describing that.
Oh man, thank you. Well, thank you so much, man. It's you know, the book itself is just talking about that relationship, talking about those difficulties, you know. And I think, like you said, we've all dated a girl who's, you know, don't like her daddy. And, you know, what I've learned, and I don't have any kids, but what I've learned growing up, and my mom and dad had a very a contentious relationship for a while, that, you know, there's so much shades of gray in life, you know, and the story that you may get from one person may not be the whole story. That doesn't mean the story that somebody told you isn't the truth. It's the truth in the way they see it, you know? And so, you know, and it's funny because there's a scene in the book, the only scene in the book that made me cry was the scene when after the jewelry store heist and he gets the money, and like, this isn't a heist, like this isn't Ocean's 11. They described it like that in promotional stuff, but it's not Ocean 11. He's not trying to retire. He's not trying to leave town. No. He's just trying to get out from under these bills. Yeah, I just want to be able to pay my bills. And so when he goes and he buys like the Delmonico steaks from Walmart, and before he does that, he goes to see his daughter. And he gives her like this envelope full of money, the first year's tuition for the college. And they're sitting on the hood of the Duster, and the sun's going down, and he just tells her, hey, you got to get out of this town. You got to get out of this town. Your star is too bright to shine here. And she didn't say anything for a long time. And she's like, why would you do this? He's like, you're my daughter. And then she doesn't say anything for a long time. And finally she's like, and you're my daddy. And they just sit there. And it was like, I remember getting choked up writing it because I've seen that scene play out so many times in the lives of people that I care about. You know, that there's this person that you don't really understand them, but you know they love you, but there's a difficulty in communicating. And so and I've read and seen I've listened to songs like that, so many songs like that. And so I really wanted to try to get that feeling. I wanted, if nothing else you didn't get from this book, I wanted you to get that he loves his children. You know, and it's interesting because I have different conversations with people about Bug, and some people like him, and some people don't. Some people, he made these terrible decisions. Yeah, he did. He beats people up and kills people and shoots them and blows them up and shit. But at the same time, he's just struggling. He's trying to do the right thing so hard, and I know a lot of people like that. And I think those people deserve to have their stories told as well.
Yeah. And I told you this real quick. Sorry. I told you this on social media, because my first reading that book, I couldn't help thinking about Troy Maxson, the father in Fences. And I remember I taught that play. That August Wilson play, which is one of the best plays I've ever read.
I wrote a song about that play.
Yeah. Well, that is, I mean, yeah. I couldn't help thinking about Troy, and how Troy is with his, the famous line he says to Corey, it's who says I got to love you? I just have to provide for you. And that's kind of my job. Who says I got to love you? And I don't know. I couldn't help thinking about the parallels between those two, between Bug and Troy. I mean, did you ever, I think you've read the play. I think you said this to me, but
I've read it and seen the play. Yeah. I've read the play and seen it performed, and I saw the movie. And for me, I thought the biggest parallel, if you wanted to ask me what character was most like Troy, really it's Bug's mom. It's his mother more than Bug, because she's this really damaged, broken woman. And she's very quick with it. She's a little mean. But really, once you delve into who she is, she's that way because the man she loves left her. And maybe he left for the right reasons, but he still left. And she never got past it. She never got over it. And she's got to look at this guy, this boy, this man who looks just like him, and so for me, that was the relationship that really was most similar to the Fences. She loves Bug, but I don't think she likes him very much.
Yeah.
And I think I think that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes. I did not have that kind of relationship with my mom, thank God. But I know people who did. That your parents love you and they're going to take care of you. They don't want anything to happen to you. But for whatever reason, y'all just don't get along. Y'all just don't, people who, you ask yourself, would I be friends with my parents if they weren't my parents? And, that's a hard question, I think, to answer. And I think Ella is that kind of person. I don't know if her and Bug would be friends if they weren't mother and son. But having said all that, he still loves her. He still will do anything for her too. And so that's why I saw the parallel with Fences.
Interesting.
That emotional resonance.
I'm fascinated in the rituals of writers. I read all those Paris Review interviews with writers, and they talk about they write for a certain amount of period, a certain room, certain time of day. What is your writing? If you have one, how important is ritual to your writing process?
When I first started writing, it didn't matter. Like, I was just like, I got to write, because I was working a 9-to-5 job. I could only write on my lunch break. and then sometimes after work. I was in a relationship that wasn't a good relationship, and so I'm trying to keep that together. And so I would just write whenever I got a few minutes, I'd write. Now that I've got a little more in a better place, and I've got a little more rhythm and a little more freedom. Certain things I tend to write at night. I'm not a morning person. I like to sleep in late if I can. Excuse me. I don't like to get up early, so I tend to write at night. I have to have music playing. Spotify, I have a bunch of different Spotify playlists. I made a playlist for Blacktop. I made a playlist for Razorblade Tears. But it doesn't have to be that playlist. I just like listening to music. I have a little lap desk that I sit in my recliner, and I put the computer on my lap desk, and that's sort of my little ritual. I have this is the craziest one. I love hats. I have a lot of different hats. So I write in a ball cap, and I don't know why. I just do. It's one of them things. Maybe I'm a little superstitious, but ever since I started writing in a ball cap, my stuff started selling. So I write in a ball cap. I typically write 2 hours a day, probably no more than that, unless I'm like on deadline, or unless I'm like, I just get caught up in the moment. When I was finishing Razorblade Tears, I wrote the last 43,000 or 44,000 words of Razorblade Tears in like 3 hours. I was just on fire, just, racing toward this end, and I'm just on fire writing it. I couldn't stop. And because for me, a lot of times writing, and I don't know if it's like this for BJ, but for me, writing sometimes it's like you put your finger in this light socket, and you just get this charge sometimes. And then sometimes you look down and you look up at the clock, and 4 hours have gone by, and it's like you go to a different place almost, especially when it's really good, when it's really cooking, when you're really clicking, when everything's coming together. I feel like you go to a different place mentally. The only other ritual I think is I do like to have me a little shot of whiskey before I start writing sometimes. Not all the time, but especially if I'm in the middle of a book. The beginning of the book, I don't. But if I'm in the middle of the book and I've really established the characters and I know where they're going, I'll take a little shot of whiskey to just get going and loosen myself up at night. But other than that, the technical process, a lot of people come down the pants versus plotter debate. I'm sort of a hybrid. Before I begin a long project, like a book, right now I'm working on an audio play, but before I begin a project, I like to write myself a long synopsis. Basically, it's me telling myself the story, and it's just a stream of consciousness. Character does this, does that, goes there, goes here. I do that because for me, I have to be able to see the roadmap of the story. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to take that particular road, but I have to see that there's a viable path from the beginning to the middle to the end. I don't like writing open-ended. And I'm not, no shade to anybody that does. I don't like doing it. But on the other hand, I'm not so anal retentive that I like map everything out on a whiteboard and have note cards and stuff. I don't do that either. I kind of just, like I said, I'm sort of in the middle. I like to have an idea and I'll refer to the synopsis. A lot of times the story doesn't end up even close to the synopsis. But it's like I said, it just gives me a guide. It tells me this story has a viable ending. I think a lot of times books that I read that I don't like, and it's not very many. I love to read and I love books of all kinds. But if I end up not connecting with a book, a lot of times I can tell where it feels like the writer they had an open-ended writing session and they didn't have a plan about where they were going to stop and where they were going to end the story. And I think that's the most difficult thing as a writer. So that's all part of my process. I typically take anywhere from 3 months to 6 months for a first draft. I don't like to do multiple drafts. Like if I could get away with doing the first draft, I would. I hate revising. I hate it. I really do. I know some people that are like, oh, I love the minutia. I can't stand it. It's like, so, and I'll do a first draft pass. Then I'll get some friends to read it and get some notes. When I wasn't with a publisher and I was just writing on my own, I would just make everybody read it. Like I would just email it to all my friends and force them to read it. I've kind of tapered that down a little bit now. And then once I get back their recommendations and stuff, I'll go back in and some things I take, like, okay, I'll take advisement on that. Some things I like, no, I'm not gonna do that. And then the final edit is just a search for continuity errors. It's like I just go through it again and again to make sure it's tight, that everything makes sense. Or if it doesn't make sense, I can make the argument that you should make this mental leap with me so that it makes sense. I think too many people get caught up worrying about cliches and tropes. I mean, tropes are tropes for a reason. It's because they work. It all depends on how you put your special spin on it. It's like, it's like music, like songwriting. There's a finite amount of melodies, but it's all about how you put your own flourish on it, in my opinion. So
I want to follow up one thing, the music thing. I cannot write with music at all. And I've never read, and I'm not saying it doesn't work for you. I've never read one study that says it works. So I'm fast. I wish I could. I need total silence. How can you write? How can you hear the words in your head when you've got that other distraction? Please.
Well, here's the thing. I can't write with a television playing. Like if there's a movie playing in the background or a news report or something, I can't. I gotta go in my office where I'm at now, and I've got to get away from that. But the music, when I listen to music, I don't really hear the words. I just hear the music. It creates a rhythm. And for me personally, it creates a rhythm to my writing. And so it just gives me this sort of extra little juice to write the prose and the phrases and the metaphors in a way that feels to me musical. And so, there's a rhythm to the omniscient narrator when I'm talking in that third person. There's a rhythm to the dialogue between the characters. I try to really make dialogue in my books feel like real people's conversations where people cut each other off, thoughts disappear or float away. And so the music channels give me that rhythm. On a personal note, if I'm writing a chase scene, right, I'll listen to some like hardcore hip hop, some deep, muddy, nasty blues, maybe some hard rock. But if I'm writing a very emotional scene, an epiphany, so to speak, I might listen to something really soft and mellow. The music helps me establish my own personal tone. I write cinematically, so I see everything in my head. And so the music is just this personal soundtrack to the movie that's playing in my head. And so like in Blacktop Wasteland, in the first jewelry store heist, when they're getting away, in my head, I'm listening to Whipping Post by the Allman Brothers. I'm listening to Annie Up by M.O.P. I'm listening to Protect Your Neck by Wu-Tang. I'm listening to Mudhoney or something by like Mudvayne, Death Blooms or something like that, because I want that intensity. On the other hand, when Bug is talking to his wife after the first heist and she's scared that things are going to spiral out of control, I might listen to something like more sedate, or something more like I remember that specific scene. Like I listened to what's the boy name? Tyler Childers' song Urine. You're on mine, because I wanted to get that rhythm, that feeling, and because for all the bad stuff that Bug does in the book, he loves his wife. You can say that he makes mistakes, but he loves that woman, and she loves him back. And so I wanted to get that feeling in my own mind and songs like that express intense emotion help me kind of translate that to the page. I mean, I know a lot of people say they can't do it. I have a lot of writer friends that absolutely have to write in total silence. That doesn't work for me. I stop feeling like I'm telling a story, and it feels like I'm actually just typing. And I need that rhythm, that I don't know how to describe it, that alternative flow to kind of get me into the place I need to be to write the story.
So when you write, so if I hear you correctly, if you say I want to write a sedate scene, so which comes first, the scene or the music? So you say I want to write a sedate scene. I'll pick a song to get me in the mood. It's not that the song unconsciously creates that. You deliberately search for a song to create that mood.
Right. Exactly. So like, for instance, I wrote in RAZORBLADE Tears, there's a couple scenes where the two main characters are talking quietly. There's a scene at the graveyard where one of the main characters is talking to us at the grave of his son. And I was like, okay, I want to really hammer this home. I want to hammer his guilt and his regret home. And so I put on, which was a mistake because it made me cry, I put on My Father's House by Bruce Springsteen. you know, and I'm listening to that as I'm writing this song, and I'm writing and crying. So, but I wanted to get that feeling. I wanted the reader to get that feeling. I hope they do. You know, at the same time, you know, there's a scene where there's a very brutal fist fight. You know, and so you know, I play, you know, a song, you know, like Street Fighting Man, or you know, the Breeze by Leonard Skinner, or something hardcore hip hop, something like that. And again, the scene comes first, and then when I revise the book, I take all the songs that I picked to write the different scenes, I put them on a playlist, and I listen to them as I'm revising, and it becomes this really, for me, pleasant background noise, so that I can get into the zone to write on and fix the book and try to find the mistakes.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. When you write a song, do you feel like you write more in a storytelling sort of theme or way, or are you doing like an observational song? Like, are you telling stories about different characters? Do you see the subjects of your songs as characters, or are you just speaking for BJ out of your own, you know, wherewithal?
I think I'm kind of in the middle. Fictional narrative is definitely something that is a core of my writing. But I also, no matter who the character is, I find pieces of myself in that character, because that's what makes it believable to me. And if I don't believe the character, then nobody else is going to believe the character. Like I'm the first line of defense. Like I've got to trick myself into thinking like, okay, that's real. Like the guy singing that is real. Mm-hmm. And so the only way I can do that is to put these elements of myself in, whether it be the self-doubt, whether it be the personal experience, whether it be, there's got to be a piece of honesty in anything fictional. And if somebody makes fun of it, I'm like, oh, it's just a fake story. But, you know, if somebody asks if it really happened, I've got to find a piece of myself in it. So as a kid, I was just writing observations. But as I've gotten older and as I've kind of defined what my voice is, which I'm, 15 years in, I feel like I've really found my voice as far as songwriting goes. And it's about finding that mix of, okay, if it's going to be a fictional character-based song that tells a story, I still have to put a piece of me in there to make it believable. Mm-hmm. Kind of like that's what I was saying.
I think. No, I agree. I think that's true. I think like people always ask me, "Are you Bug? Or are you Ike and Ronnie or Buddy Lee or any of my characters?" And it's like, no, I've had a couple bar fights, but I'm not. I've never been a wheelman. But I think, like you said, you've got to find the truth of the character, the reality of the character, what's real about him or her, and what makes that character, that person resonate, what makes them tick. And once you find that, then I can make you believe that Bug can jump a car off of an overpass. I can make you believe that Bug can handle himself in a fight. I can make you believe that Ronnie is a little bit smarter than maybe people give him credit for, or a little bit dumber than he thinks. I think it's interesting. The reason I ask is I read an article, and I don't know the person's name, but the lead singer, there used to be a band that a friend of mine really liked called 16 Horsepower. And there was a guy who was the lead singer of that band, and they used a lot of Christian. They weren't Christian roots rock, but they used a lot of Christian imagery, a lot of theological imagery. And so a person asked him, like, how much of the song is you and how much of it is your beliefs and how much of it is just a character in this song? And he was very much, the song and I are one. I'm writing about everything and the way I view it and my struggle with my soul and with my beliefs and stuff like that. And I think that can be dangerous, and if you're a pro wrestling fan, they call it living your gimmick. And I think the reason I'm asking all this is I just saw a great documentary on Ernest Hemingway. And I think he was a person who was undoubtedly an incredible writer, an incredible stylist, but also somebody who was quote unquote living his gimmick. Like he believed he had to behave and view the world the same way his characters did. And I wonder if that's maybe what, I won't say led to his demise, but what gave him a great difficulty through his life, trying to live up to that idealized version of masculinity. And so I don't feel that I don't think you need to actually have, punch somebody in the face to write a song, but I think I'll write a story about it. But I do think you need to realize what that means. I don't know if you have to have had your heart broken to write a love song. I don't think it hurts, but people that can do it without that personal interaction are geniuses. I'm not a genius. There are people that can do it. And so I'm just interested. I don't know. It's curious. It's something that because I think that does give you difficulty later on in life if you identify so much with this persona or, this ideal that you write about. I write about a lot of dark shit, but I don't really consider myself a dark-minded person. I love to laugh. I love to have fun. I rather laugh than cry, and even though I read a lot of dark books and I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts, I also love listening to a lot of comedies and I love cartoons. And so I think, there's this idea of separating yourself from your creation. I'm curious about that. I love talking to other creative people.
It's for me, it's, I spent the first couple records I ever made were very much me looking in the mirror, writing about this guy. And I was writing about what I was doing, which was just trying to figure out who I was. I was an early 20-year-old kid who was on the road 300 days a year. So I wrote a lot about bars and drinking and chasing girls and wondering if I made the right career choice. But then I realized that character, the idolized version of myself, is so one-dimensional that you can't build a career around. You can't build a career around being that guy for the next 40 years. That kind of guy dies by the time he's 29, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I had to start. Yeah. And I think the talent is stop writing about yourself and writing about other people and characters to where good enough to where people think it's yourself. Like when you're writing about other things that aren't you, and you're able to convince a large portion of your audience that could be you, that's the talented songwriters. Like when you listen, to John Prine start off, I am an old woman, at the beginning of Angel from Montgomery. You're like, for a minute, you're like, I forgot that there's a dude singing this song. Like it's so like, and that's what like when you can write and the listener thinks that when you make it believable enough to where you can write about something that's not about you, that you have zero vested interest in, zero experience in, but you can write about it in such a way that nobody else knows whether or not you did. Like when somebody asks me, like, did that really happen to you? My question is, do you think it happened to me? Did I sell it enough to where did it happen? I like to see, like, because if somebody's like, I really think that like this person was you, I'm like, then that means I'm getting better, because none of that ever happened to me. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, I've got plenty of songs about like losing partners and losing relationships and watching people die and watching, and people are like, so like, I wrote a song about having a kid way before I had a kid. And people are like, man, you really captured fatherhood. You know what it's like. I was like, I don't have a kid. I was like, I just listen to my friends who do have kids, and I can make it believable enough to where you thought that I have a daughter. And this is
I think that's the truth.
Yeah.
I think that's the secret. I love I'm a huge fan of Jeff Buckley, and he died way too soon. But he has this beautiful song called Lover You Should Have Come Over. And I don't know if he wrote it, and I think he might have. But there's these beautiful lines in there that are just, they're soul searing. They break your heart. It's about a song about a guy who regrets whatever happened. He messed up this relationship and he wants this woman back. And there's this line in there that he would give. He's like, I give my kingdom for a kiss upon her shoulder. And man, I felt that shit. I was like, yes, I've been there. And then I read an interview with the guy before he passed. And they were like, what's that based on? He said, oh, my friend, he broke up with this girl and he's really bummed about it. And I wrote a song about it. So it didn't even happen to him. But that's the level, that's the mark of genius, when you can take something that has no resonance to your own personal life. And like you said, when I first started writing, all my stories were about big dudes that felt insecure getting in bar fights, because that's what I was doing. And, that make mistakes. I just added crime elements to it, And so once you start not writing about yourself, and like you said, writing for the macro verse, not the micro verse, I think you get better as a writer, songwriter, filmmaker, what have you. And I think, like I said, the true geniuses, the creative geniuses, are the people who can write about not only themselves, but people that are outside of their purview in a way that makes you believe it, And so like, I just finished reading The Secret History by Donna Tartt. And, she's never, that we know of, killed anybody at a Northwestern college or Northeastern college, but she writes about it in such a compelling way. She's up there. She's on another level. So again, I'm fascinated by that idea because I have some friends that have played around with being musicians, and a lot of them are in cover bands, bar bands, local. And I think, like I said, they get caught up in living that gimmick. Like you said, what you can do at 29 years old in a bar as the lead singer of a cover band, I don't know if you need to be doing that if it's healthy to do that at 39. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think so. I think with writers it's the same thing. I think too many writers get caught up in the idea of like, I've got to create this image, I got to live this gimmick, I got to live this image, and it's like, no, just make it up, man. Just lie. So
that's another word for it. That's another word for creative license is just kind of lie about it.
Yeah.
So BJ, I've interviewed probably 200 people for my website. And so there's some interviews that I remember, like a few things people say. What you told me, BJ, about the 80-page Word document you have, where you organize song ideas by, if I get this right, and I just want to hear you tell the story again, because I found this to be so amazing. You have an 80-page Word document that's organized by theme and by emotion. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's color-coded.
It's color-coded. I forgot about that. And and I just, once you told me that, it blew my mind. Anytime,
I run every day. I run a 5K every morning before I get going. It just gets blood flowing. It gets brain working. And 90% of my ideas come when I'm running. It's, when my body is trying to escape my legs screaming at me, like, why are you doing this to us? My mind goes to this kind of free space. And when I'm in that free space, that's kind of the ether that I can pull stuff from. And that's when I'm on a different level. And so I'll come home and I'll take everything that I came up with, like one-liners or themes or song ideas, and I just put them into a Word document. But over the years, I've done this so many times to where it's easier for me to locate them if I just go ahead and put them where they belong. So I have themes and I have emotions, and that's where they go. And so when I'm going to write a song, and let's say I'm writing a song about a breakup, or let's say I'm writing a song about, joy. And so I get to a line, I'm like, well, I've got the hook, I've got the chorus, but I need a strong one-liner in that second verse. I go to my joy section and I go through and I read and I say, what could fit here? And it's like putting together a puzzle, but you just have unlimited puzzle pieces, and then you find the best piece that fits in there. And so some writers don't do that, and some writers, they write what they write, and then any excess fat they throw away. Me, I'm the guy who takes that excess fat and just throws it back into the pool and says, maybe I can use that later. It didn't work for this. Like, I edited it away and it got carved off, but who knows? That could be the central point of another song. And, it's the lyrical hoarder in me. It's like, I can't, I would be on a show if they had like Lifetime presents like Hoarders, like songwriter edition. I would just be like, it's like, here's my room full of joy ideas, and here's my room full of sad songs. And, my kids don't come over anymore because all the pages,
it's funny you were talking about like running. I try to hike a lot now. I got a bum knee that's giving me a problem, but I used to lift weights a lot before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, my Instagram was just gym pictures. So that tells you a lot about who I am as a person. But I would get ideas like deadlifting or bench pressing or really pushing myself, like really like doing like a really intense kettlebell workout or something like that. And I would get an idea, and like I had my phone with me, and I would just grab my phone and go to like a Google Doc. I have a Google Doc page, and I would just jot down this idea, a polyamorous trio gets caught up with the Russian mob, and just type it in there. So if you like to your point about your Google Doc, about your Word document, I have a whole bunch of like particles and participial ideas that I kind of just leave there. And then maybe I'll come back to it. Maybe I won't. Sometimes it'll be a short story that I thought maybe could have been a book, but it's not strong enough. So I think a lot of creative people do that. it's fascinating for me with songwriting though, because I'm not a songwriter. I dabble with a little bit of poetry. I can't play an instrument, save my life. I can't play the damn triangle. But songwriting is so unique to me because it's like you're doing a spoken word piece. So you're acting, but you're also writing about emotion and the internal monologue and, man versus himself, man versus nature, so on and so forth. It's existentialism. And so I love really good songwriters, regardless of genre, because I listen to anything. We talked about Bruce Springsteen earlier, but I'm a huge fan of Chris Cornell from Soundgarden. Love anybody that can write just really strong musical examination of the human condition. And for me, I'm wondering, as a musician, like you were talking about getting the chord or the hook, do you feel like sometimes you write around how good the hook is? Like you come up with this intro that's really badass, like, oh man, this rocks. I gotta make this work. Like, does that kind of drive you sometimes? Or did the idea come up like, I got this chord and I got this hook. I kind of want to make this idea. I had this idea about a song I want to write. Like, does sometimes the melody drive the words more than the words drive the melody?
Melody's always secondary for me, usually. For me, it's about coming up with a one-liner. It's about coming up with, like we talked, I think you hit on it earlier, there's only so many things you can write a song about. There's only so many topics. There's only so many chords you can use. Everybody's written a love song. Everybody's written a death song. Everybody's written a divorce song. Everybody's written a heartbreak song. It's about putting your own spin on it and saying it in a way that nobody's ever said it before. And so when you come up with that one-liner, like if it's good enough, it can spark an entire other song, the rest of the song. So what I always, every song I've ever written has started with one line. And then, like you said earlier, it's about, okay, so how can this one line end up as 3 verses in a chorus? And so then it's about, okay, the first verse needs to be the setup. The second verse needs to go either elaborate on that first verse or be a completely different setup. Third verse conclusion, maybe a bridge conclusion. And the chorus needs to be the hook that ties all 3 of those things together. And then once you have that plan and you have that one line, it's about writing something that fits into your puzzle that's just as good as that one line all the way down the page. And all songwriters, I'm so jealous of what you guys do, because what long form novelists do is take what I do. I condense what you do in 350 pages, and I make it I'm lazy. I make it 3 verses and a chorus. Like I'm jealous because, like, if somebody came to me and said, "Hey, BJ, I really like this song that you have. It's so deep. It's got a lot of parts. Can you write me 350 pages about this idea?" I wouldn't know where to start. I would be like, "Well, I can." I was like, it took me.
I think that's the thing, though. Everybody, it's that quote. I think it's from Einstein. You can't quantify somebody by their gift. Like, you won't call a fish stupid because it can't climb a tree. Yeah. I'm the exact opposite. I'm very, I won't say envious, but I'm just in awe of really good songwriting. Because I know I'm long-winded. I'm long-winded as hell. And so when I see a songwriter that can take everything I've taken 300 pages to say and condense it down, like you mentioned John Prine, there's a hole in Daddy's arm where all the money goes. It's like, well, shit. One line. 24 chapters. Yeah. And so, but at the same time, it was funny you said about the one line. I really think, for me, this is maybe a writer superstition, writer technique. I struggle with getting the right opening line. Like, the right opening line for me personally, I don't know about anybody else as a writer, I have to feel like it gets you in the door. And for me, a good, strong, pithy, interesting opening line, it's what sets the tone. BLACKTOP Wasteland, I wrote around that for a long time, trying to get that line. And I was sitting on the back deck and I was drinking, actually drank some lemonade, and the sun was setting. And a friend of mine was with me, and he looked up. He said, "Man, the night looks really nice tonight." And I said, "Yeah, it looks like a painting." And it was like, that's it. That's how I opened the book. That's how I opened the line. I have a book I wrote before BLACKTOP Wasteland called My Darkest Prayer, and that was put out independent publisher And the opening line for that was, I handle the bodies, because I knew some folks that work in the mortuary service. And somebody said, like, how do you describe your job? And they're like, I handle the bodies. And that was the way I opened it. And I think that's similar to songwriting in a way. And of course, like you said, you got to build upon it and create characters and create a narrative that drives it. But I think whether it's songwriting or poetry or even a screenplay, the opening line is way more important than people. I think there's a whole school of thought, the postmodernists, that think, oh, that doesn't matter. Narrative structure doesn't matter. I'm all for experimentation. I'm all for experimental fiction or filmmaking. But for me personally, what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to get you with that hook. I'm trying to get you in the door. And then once we get in the door, then we can talk about it and see how things go. And I'm not trying to do. Go ahead.
I think one of the things I read somewhere is you have 10 seconds. You have 10 seconds to get somebody's attention. You have 10 seconds from the time you start speaking. You have 10 seconds to whether they make up their mind, this is something I really want to dig into, or this is something I want to hit next on. And
I think that's so true.
I'm with you. The first line, the first second is going to, especially when it comes to a book, when you pick up a book, that first paragraph is what's going to set my next 4 hours into motion. And if that first line isn't worth 4 hours, that's the book that might take me a month to read. But then, like literally, I got done with 3 pages of your book and was like, "Honey, you're cooking dinner tonight." Like I'm in the sunroom until I'm done with this.
Thank you so much, man.
Like I was hooked. And I think songwriting. There's a lot of people that don't put as much emphasis. Like for me, that first line of every song has to be something that makes you say, ooh, well, I have no idea what's coming next. Like, where is this? Like, when you can get somebody in that door and then slam it behind them and just surprise the shit out of them, that's the why we do it. That's the, and when and it's funny, you said I was just sitting on my back porch and then it came to me. It's like, when you hear it, you know it. When you hear that opening line, you're like, oh, that's it.
Yeah. It's the pureness of it, Go ahead.
No, I was going to say really quickly that a song like does that for me, not necessarily the opening line, but is Choctaw Bingo by James McMurtry. And listening to that song, I interviewed him for my website a couple of years ago, and I think he was driving down the road. And I remember he was driving down the road, and all of a sudden he'd see a sign. He'd comment on the sign during the interview, and I was like, "Oh shit, is this going to be in a song? I'm going to read next album." Like, but Choctaw Bingo, I remember listening to that thinking, how the hell is he going to finish this line? Like, he's saying so many words telling the story. Where's he getting all the space to say this stuff? And every time I listen to that song, it amazes me. And I think, what's he going to rhyme this with? But it's more of, he's telling this story so quickly. And I just don't know how he's going to fill all stuff into that. That's the song that reminds me, first time I heard that blew me away.
Well, it helps when your dad's Larry McMurtry.
Yeah, but you know what's funny? But here's what's funny. If you go back to the interview, I asked him, I said, so I imagine, given who your father is, your voracious reader here was like, haven't read a book in years. He goes, I couldn't believe it. He goes, something about, I was around books with my dad's bookstore. I remember going to that bookstore in DC when I was a kid. His dad had that bookstore that ended up moving to Texas, started here in DC. We're going there when I was a kid. My mother would take me there. And I remember thinking, well, surely he reads every day. And he said, no, I was on books all my life. He's like, and it really kind of bummed me out because that was not the answer I was expecting.
I don't know how you have a dad like Larry McMurtry and you don't read books. I don't know that. It's like,
you guys continue talking. I'm gonna look this up right now. I'm gonna see the exact answer that he told me. You guys keep talking. I'm gonna look this up.
Like John Waters said, if you go home with somebody and they don't have any books in their house, don't sleep with them. It's like,
it blows my mind because I
was a kid.
Go ahead.
Like you, I was a kid that read a lot. Like, reading was the escape from small town, southeastern Virginia. And like you, my mom and my family were like, yeah, get your education. And my mom was big on it, like, get a college degree or educate yourself. Read the newspaper. Read different sources of information. Always verify information. Read for pleasure. Read when you don't have to. And I still am a voracious reader today. And so, but on a serious note, I mean, I guess it's all about the personal reaction the personal situation you're in. I can see it's just like It's just like if your dad's a baker, you don't want to spend all day making biscuits. I think that's kind of the thing too. So it all depends on the situation. So.
All right. So here's what he said. I asked him, does anything you read ever inspire you? This is his exact words. I might read one book a year, and sometimes I skip a year. My dad is a novelist and also a collector. We had books lining the walls like wallpaper, so I never paid any attention to them. He also had a bookstore that I wanted nothing to do with because the book business never interested me.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah. But
And that's it for the latest episode of Songwriters on Process. Don't forget, you can find all of my interviews with over 200 songwriters on my Songwriters on Process website at songwritersonprocess.com, going all the way back to 2010. You can read them, watch them, or listen to them. So until next time, thanks for listening.